Well, it's been a long time coming. VenomFangx posted a 6-part video series called Satan Invented Evolution. Yes, that's really what it's called. I am planning on posting a 6-part video series wherein I refute each and every part of his 6-part video series. Can I say 6-part video series some more? Yes, I can. 6-part video series. 6-part video. Wait for it. Wait for it. Motorcycle ruining dramatic effect. Wait for it. Series. Oh yeah, that's great, isn't it? Now, before we start, you should know that VenomFangx will not approve these video responses. I won't even attempt to get them approved because he doesn't approve anyone who curses or anyone who disagrees with him, even in a respectful manner most of the time. K-Bane actually responded to him a few times in a very respectful manner, and I don't never think I've ever heard K-Bane curse, and he wasn't approved. But oftentimes he will use the profanity as an excuse not to approve video responses, and he's apparently very offended by profanity. So I just wanted to get right off the bat and say, fuck you, VenomFangx. I hope you die, motherfucker. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, you fucking shit for brains, motherfucking creationist piece of shit. Alright, so we got that out of the way. The second thing you should know, and I think you've already figured it out by now, is that I'm not planning on doing the most civil response. I'm not going to be friendly and do the rabbit ape thing where I'm like, okay, well, here's why this claim is wrong, and hold your hand through it. I'm going to go. It's going to be fucking ad hominem laden attack videos. Basically, I will refute a few points. I'm not going to be totally without content, but for the most part, this is just ad hominem shit to own the ever-loving fuck out of him. Not that it's really necessary because he owns the ever-loving fuck out of himself, but people really like to watch outright slaughter, I suppose. Another thing you should know, and this is the third thing, I guess the third disclaimer in a series of 4. There's going to be 4 disclaimers, but this is the third one. The third disclaimer is that if you've never seen a VenomFangx video and you're not sure what to expect when I put him on screen and he starts talking, you may want to have someone in the room to hold you back to prevent you from punching your computer screen as hard as you can, because that is a natural reaction. I barely caught myself. I almost did it. I was like, oh, motherfucker. Then I remembered how I broke my webcam when I tried to punch Sword of Allah. You know, it's not very effective to punch someone through the internet, unfortunately. That technology has not yet been invented. The fourth disclaimer is that he looks a lot like this kid I went to school with. And I was kind of mean to the kid in school. And I feel bad about it retrospectively. So I might actually go a little bit too easy on him because I just, he just reminds me of this kid I was really mean to back in high school. It'd be totally fucked up to find out he was the same kid, because me and this kid always used to have theological debates too. And, anyway. So let's just get right the fuck to it, because, yeah, let's just get right to it after I blabbed on for 4 minutes.
Welcome back. Got a question for you guys. Do you believe that a frog can turn into a prince? Did you know they're still teaching that fairy tale in schools, although instead of a magical kiss, no. Now it's millions and billions of years.
Ooh, millions and billions of years. I love how you're saying that little Dr. Evil impression of yours. Millions and... I can't do it. You do it a lot better than me, but you should have just put the fucking pinky up to the mouth, because you know you were doing a fucking Dr. Evil impression just then. Like, everyone who believes in evolution is Dr. Evil-esque, we should, stroking our little felines and all that. Yeah, you caught us. Instead of believing that a frog can turn into a more complex life form with magic, we believe that it might be possible incrementally over, millions and millions of years. That's a really outrageous idea. You're right. It's totally out of line. Even though it's we have a fossil record and DNA evidence and all that stuff. I mean, that's all just bullshit. Science was invented by Satan, as you've already pretty much said in earlier videos. So, fuck us. You're right. You win. You scored that point right there.
There are two ways to look at this world. One is to look at the Earth and say, this is amazing. A Big Bang made this from nothing. That is called the humanist worldview. The other way to look at the world is to say, wow, there's an incredible design here. There must be a smart designer. This is called the Creationist worldview, and it is at war with the humanist worldview. Someone is wrong.
Someone certainly is. First of all, that's not called the humanist worldview. Humanists are people who have a very pro-human point of view. It has nothing to do with how the Earth came to be. People who believe in the Big Bang are not called humanists. Those are two totally separate things. But, of course, you don't care. You'll go right on spouting the same shit even after you've been corrected because you're a fucking idiot.
First, let's try answer the 4 great questions according to the 2 worldviews. Let's use evolution first. Who am I? What am I worth? Well, if evolution is true, you're nothing important. You're just a bunch of protoplasm that washed up on the beach. And you're not worth a thing. In fact, since you're a polluter of the environment, the more of you we can get rid of, the better.
What? Who thinks that? I'm sure people do think that. I'm sure there are people who think that way. But, I don't. I don't know many evolutionists who do. It's so contradictory too, because later on in the video you go on and talk about how we adopt this philosophy because we want to feel like gods. We're trying to take God's place. And, but in this particular sense, you're saying that we all believe that human beings are just degenerate nothings. So which is it? Which do we believe? Are we trying to take our place among the gods? Or are we trying to lower ourselves to pawn scum? I mean, you have to choose. I mean, if you're going to distort our worldview, you at least have to choose what you're going to distort it to.
Where did I come from? Well, if evolution is true, you're just the result of a cosmic birth 20 billion years ago by sheer accident.
And you're saying cosmic, which leads me to think you're talking about the Big Bang. Which leads me to think that you think the Big Bang is like a biological event, and it's not. And people have told you this before. I know they have. You've heard enough times that cosmology and biology and chemistry, those are all separate fields of science. They have nothing to do with one another. And yet you seem to continue to ignore this simple fucking fact. It's not even difficult to comprehend. I mean, it's not even necessary for you to attack the Big Bang in order to attack evolution, because, I mean, even if there is no Big Bang, even if you prove the Big Bang was a bunch of bullshit, which you'll never fucking do, someone might, but it won't be fucking you, even if you did manage that, it wouldn't detract from evolution even slightly. It would have no bearing upon evolution whatsoever.
Why am I here? Well, if evolution is true, you're not here for a reason, you're actually here because there is no reason. And if it feels good, you might as well do it because you're going to die one day. So if you want to go murder anyone you want, or rob a bank, or, just make life miserable for everyone, by all means. I mean, hey, there's no meaning to life, right?
Hey, man, you might as well do all that stuff because Jesus will forgive you afterwards, I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. If you just ask forgiveness from Jesus later, I mean, that's fucking cool. Rob, rape, steal, kill. You just ask forgiveness after it's all said and done. You see how that feels to just have, your philosophy on life twisted into meaning something that you would never endorse in a million years? Don't feel good, does it? Knock that shit off, asshole.
Where am I going when I die? Well, if evolution is true, you're going to be recycled into an earthworm or a plant.
Okay. How could you get that one wrong? It's so fucking easy. No. You don't get recycled to an earthworm or a plant. There's not like reincarnation. You're just gone. That's it. You have no brain to think with anymore. All your thought processes happen up here. All your senses come from this fucking epidermis loaded with fucking nerve endings. You taste with your fucking tongue. You smell with your fucking nose. You see with your fucking eyes. Everything that you sense can be explained physically. So, when you die, that's all gone. You just don't exist any fucking more. It's the easiest fucking part of what we believe to comprehend. And you still got it wrong. You know, you think that you're just your fucking body. I mean, you know, your body might decompose into something that feeds the soil or something. Not likely anymore. More likely you'll be fucking cremated or embalmed and then fucking pumped full of all those embalming chemicals and shoved in a fucking box in the ground. So even that's really not true anymore. But it's not you. You're just gone. It's the most depressing part of what we believe, and you couldn't even get it right. It would have been your strongest emotional argument. Do you want to believe that you're going to just be nothing? Or do you want to believe you're going to go to heaven and play with Jesus? I'm going to play with Jesus, build a little Lincoln log cabin with Jesus. Yeah, okay. Every single one of these arguments. First of all four of them are bullshit. Second of all of them are emotional appeals, because it's like, would you rather the world be dark and gloomy and depressing, or would you like it to be happy and filled with rainbows and smiles?
Now, let's look at it from the other point of view. The Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, if that's true, that gives us a very different set of answers to those questions. So, we better find out who God is and what he wants and do what he says. But you see, the devil doesn't like that. The serpent came to the woman and said, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? ?
That's your serpent impression? I mean, I am a serpent! Your regular voice sounds more like a fucking snake than that. In fact, I would give a serpent a voice pretty similar to yours. Maybe just add a little lift. Then you would just sound gay, which is better than you sound now anyway, so.
The first thing out of the devil's mouth was a question to make Eve doubt God's word.
Fear questions! Questions are the devil's tool! Every time you see a question mark, beware! Question nothing, accept everything. Whoa.
Well, the fact is that Satan can't be God because the job is not available. And he's all angry about that, so he hates God. But he can't do anything to God, so he hates us because we are made in the image of God.
But are you psychoanalyzing Satan?
I'm convinced the devil is laughing at the people who believe in evolution because he's using it to take them down to hell. He doesn't believe it, but he's glad that you do.
Foolish humans believing evidence and science over God.
Adolf Hitler once said, if you tell a lie long enough and loud enough and often enough, the people will believe it.
Yeah, nothing attests to that fact better than, hey guys, there's a magical kingdom in the sky, and when we die, if we're good and we believe in Jesus and give all our money to the church, we can go there. Wow, that sounds great. I'm in. Me too. But one thing, guys, you have to renounce all your cognitive faculties and just go with the flow, whatever the church says. Well, hell, I could do that. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that either. And then they all went to heaven and ate gumdrops.
He said they're more likely to believe a big lie than a small one.
Let's just assume that evolution and God are both a lie. They're both lies. It's both complete fucking bullshit made up to trick people. Which one would you think is bigger? The lie that we developed through this long, protracted process of mutation and adaptation and over millions and billions of years, or the idea that we were spontaneously brought into creation by a magical being who has unlimited power and unlimited wisdom, and no one knows where he came from, but we don't ask those questions. Which do you think is the bigger lie? If they're both lies, which would you think is the bigger lie?
Teachers are commanded to stress that the Earth is thought to be at least 4.5 billion years old.
Saying something in a mocking voice is enough to discredit it. Sorry, you have to have... I mean, it's okay to use a mocking voice. I mean, I'm not going... I'm not being down on you. I would almost said going down on you, and that was just a revolting image that filled my mind with. But I'm not going to be down on you for using a mocking voice to discredit something. But to have nothing else but just the mocking voice, I mean, that's pretty lame. You have this highlighted thing in a science textbook, and you say it in this really ominous tone, like, teachers are commanded to teach their children that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Like it's part of some terrifying conspiracy, Maybe they're taught to teach their children that because that's what we can discern about the age of the Earth from things like carbon dating, which we'll discuss in the refutation of one of your later videos.
This is a first grade textbook. It says Earth has changed much since its formation 4.5 billion years ago. Be sure to tell them again in second grade. Since its formation 4.5 billion years ago, Earth has changed.
Oh, change! What a ridiculous notion! Everything has always been the same! Yeah, because, we know that nothing changes. I mean, just go back to the 1800s and ask our, ancestors with the horses and buggies and shit. They'll tell you nothing ever changes. Yeah, it's obviously a conspiracy. I mean, they teach them in first grade and in second grade. I mean, if it was just in one grade, I would totally discredit everything you say. But the fact that they try to teach them the same fact 2 years in a row, that really lets you know that's totally insane. I mean, this is obviously something that's being drilled into their heads. Propaganda of the liberal school system run by the atheists and the Muslims, no doubt.
Question. Do the teachers know that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, or do they think that? They think that. Were they there?
Were they there? Were they there? What the fuck? Were you there when God created the Earth? I mean, no. You just believe it because it's in a fucking one book. And there's no evidence for your book. Our book is supported by, little things like fossil remains and carbon dating and fucking erosion.
Did you know in the early 1800s the world was thought to be about 10,000 years old? And then by the early 1900s it was thought to be about 2 billion years old? And now here in the year 2000 is 4.5 billion years old?
Anyway, yeah. Science has that pesky habit of, updating its facts as new evidence becomes available. You caught us red-handed. We're always flip-flopping, You just can't stand the idea that maybe all the answers aren't just wrapped up in a pretty little package with a fucking bow on top, can you?
Evolution is a very tricky word because there are over 5 definitions for it. Let's begin with the first one. First is cosmic evolution. If there is no God and the humanist worldview is true, they need to explain how the universe came to be, and that is what they use the Big Bang Theory for. It's the origin of time, space, and matter. We call it cosmic evolution or the Big Bang. This has never been observed, obviously, and there's no way to prove that it happened. So it is not science. Number 2, chemical evolution. The origin of higher elements from hydrogen, of course not proven either. Number 3, stellar and planetary evolution. Without the hand of God, you'd have to explain what the stars formed from or how they formed, and where the planets came from and how they formed. So stellar and planetary evolution has never been observed. We've never seen a star form, and we've never seen a planet form. We have theories of how it happened, but of course they're not founded in science. They're pure fantasy and speculation. Number 4, organic evolution, origin of life from non-living material, otherwise known as abiogenesis, which has actually been proven wrong for over 200 years. Spontaneous generation is impossible, and there's no way to get life from non-living material. Number 5, macroevolution, changing from one kind of animal to another. Of course, also unobserved. We've never seen a monkey give birth to a human. We've never seen a dog give birth to anything but a dog. A banana has never created anything but a banana. Farmers rely on the fact that micro or macroevolution never happens. When they plant an apple, they expect to get an apple every time, and they do.
Okay, first of all, cosmic evolution and planetary and stellar evolution are part of the same thing, which is cosmic evolution, which is not really related to evolution as you're discussing it in this video. Cosmic evolution is just the study of how things change in the universe. It's not there's no theory of growing complexity. I mean, there might be particular theories, but there's definitely not a unified theory yet as to how the universe formed. I don't see any reason to address chemical evolution because you say nothing to refute it in the entire rest of the series. Organic evolution is not, that's not the proper definition for anything. What you're talking about is abiogenesis, which is not part of the field of evolution. Macroevolution, of course, you're talking about speciation here, and of course speciation is documented. You're never going to see anything like a horse give birth to a monkey or some shit like that, because, yeah, you're right, animals do only give birth to their own kind. The thing is that it's not that animals are going to suddenly give birth to an entirely new species, it's that through successive generations, hundreds upon hundreds of generations, animal species might vary significantly. We've done this ourselves with dogs. I mean, just like you can breed the aggressivity out of a certain breed of dog, or you can breed a dog to be taller, or fatter, or shorter. I mean, all dogs descend from domesticated wolves. You know, I have a Maltese. I mean, he looks nothing like a fucking wolf because he was bred to be small and cute and furry, so that the women in Malta could attract the fleas away from themselves, because back in those times, fleas were a major problem for people. And the different breeds of dog have not yet become entirely different species, but they look so vastly different now that you could see how, in a few hundred more generations, they might not be able to breed anymore.
Now, there is a sixth definition called microevolution, which is proven. What microevolution is variations within kinds. So you might get a Macintosh apple, and you might get a few different types of apples, but they're still apples.
So you think the genus is free to vary, but the species isn't? How does that make sense? I mean, that's like saying that we can drive a car for a mile, but we can't possibly drive it 100 miles. You can't possibly drive until you're in a new state. You can't possibly progress to the point where you're something entirely different. How can you say that small changes are possible over a small period of time, but large changes aren't possible over a large period of time? That makes no fucking sense. You don't even have to be a fucking scientist to figure this shit out.
Scientists have been breeding the world's fastest reproducing animal, the common housefly, for the jillionth generation. There are now so many it's uncountable, and they're breeding them consecutively, one after another, trying to see when the fly will eventually not be a fly, and they're still making flies after all these years.
Plenty of examples of a speciation where one kind of fly becomes another kind of fly that cannot breed with the kind of fly that it was before, or it splits into two different species of fly, neither of which can breed with another. I know you won't accept that as speciation, even though it technically is. I know you're looking for an example of a fly becoming a moth or something along those lines. The most obvious example I can think of that is us, and how human beings and chimpanzees share a common ancestor. And this has been proven to you by Rabbit Ape, and you refuse to believe the absolute airtight fucking proof, and also proven to you again by K-Bane, both of them using retroviral DNA to prove absolutely that that we did once share a common ancestor. You totally ignore this evidence. Also, our second chromosome being a combination of two earlier chromosomes, where you can clearly see where they fused. And Ken Miller discussed this. I'll link to that fucking video as well. And I'll link to Rabbit Ape's video, and I'll link to K-Bane's video, where where it's been proven numerous times to you. Proven. I don't use the word "you were shown" like some pretty good evidence. Proven to you, beyond any fragment of a reasonable doubt, that human beings and chimpanzees share a common ancestor. And you've denied it. And even though I know you don't buy into it, I will cite, I'll link to some examples of speciation in fruit flies in those experiments. They didn't become some other creature entirely, but they became an entirely different kind of fly. One that couldn't breed with another kind of fly. That's a different species. And, it's foolish to think that just because we haven't observed a phenomenon that we all say takes millions of years, in the short amount of time that we've had this unified theory of how life came about on Earth, it's a ludicrous standard to hold it to. But we can show it. We can show it with DNA evidence, which you conveniently just dismiss as bullshit, fuck you, I'm a Christian, I don't need it.
You have two choices. Either the Big Bang, this explosion from nothingness, was the beginning, or God was the beginning. There had to be something that always existed.
So our choices are a phenomena that requires almost no complexity whatsoever, or a complex consciousness right off the bat. Do you actually listen to these words as they come out of your mouth? Don't you think that the Big Bang, just a phenomenon that just, big ass fucking explosion out there in space, I mean, that's not really what it is, but for the sake of argument, or a all-powerful being is just there, just chilling out, just like you just imagine you're God, okay? You're just sitting there, and wow, I just exist. Fuck, I mean, there's nothing else here, but I'm here. I don't know. What am I supposed to do? Well, maybe I'll make like an Earth or something. There we go, there's an Earth. And I'll put some people on it, and some plants, and some animals. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a nice little... You know what? I'm going to give them a bunch of bullshit rules just to fuck with them, because I don't really like them that much. That makes sense to you. Really, genuinely makes sense to you. You guys ever notice that VenomFangx rhymes with hardcore gay sex? I find that quite amusing. Alrighty then. VenomFangx is a stupid creationist. Part 2. Refuting Satan Invented Evolution, Part 2. Which has the, subtitle, God Created the World. What an original notion. Alright, let us delve right in. Oh, before I do, I wanted to ask VenomFangx a question. I was just kind of curious what the X in your name stood for to begin with, because I always figured it was like an algebraic thing, like the X is a variable for stupid. Anyway, let's get started.
Some people have been saying I'm stealing my arguments from Kent Hovind. Well, if you watch Kent Hovind's videos, which I'm going to link to you on the side, he always says he doesn't copyright his material, and if you watch his school classes, which he has online as well, he encourages people to use his arguments. So I'm just doing what he encourages me to do.
Obey! In other words, yes, you are stealing your arguments from Kent Hovind. I mean, you can move things along a little bit quicker and just say, yes, that's accurate. I am, in fact, a thieving little bastard.
Let's continue. The Big Bang Theory, which we've been talking about, says that an explosion came from nothing. Or nothing exploded and created everything.
Nothing? I don't ever remember reading about the Big Bang being caused by nothing.
They said it was caused by a region of space that was, like yourself, very dense, and like myself, very hot.
The Big Bang idea began with the Belgian astronomer George Edward Lemaitre. According to Isaac Asimov, Lemaitre conceived this mass to be no more than a few light years in diameter. At the very least, that would be 2 light years, or about 12 trillion miles. By 1965, that figure was reduced to 275 million miles. By 1972 to 71 million miles, by 1974 to 55,000 miles, and by 1983 to a trillionth the diameter of a proton.
Once again, this strange argument that science always changes its mind. It's not steady like the good old Bible. We're not ever going to have to revise that. I mean, you know, so we have one that's called an Old Testament and one that's called a New Testament, but I mean, we only revise it every few thousand years or so. I mean, it's not like science changing its mind all the time, contingent upon facts and data and all that nonsense.
That infinitesimal region, which was the beginning of everything, was a dot, where all the matter in the universe was crunched into. All the matter in the universe crunched into a dot?
I thought you said it was nothing. You see, it's kind of strange because a dot is something, and nothing is nothing. So, I mean, you seem to be confused, because there was either nothing or there was a dot. I know there's no consensus among scientists as to the size of the region that spawned this Big Bang, so you're just talking out of your ass to begin with. But even if there were some kind of consensus, the very fact that science adapts and changes as time goes along means that it's more reliable, not less reliable, than religion, which has claimed to have the same answers for the last 2,000 years, regardless of whatever new evidence is presented. And not just the last 2,000, really the last, 10, 20,000.
Now, the real difference between an evolutionist and a creationist like myself is that in the beginning, I believe God created the heavens and the earth. However, the evolutionist believes in the beginning, a dot created the heavens and the earth.
Well, okay, fine. Let's go along with your dot thing, and we'll talk about this for a second. Now, God created man in his image. You agree with that. So that would mean that that means God is probably about the same size as a man. Does that make sense so far? And have I stepped on any toes? I know that some Christians are going to say no, because God is everything and all this and all that, or he created us in his spiritual image and blah blah, but let's just assume, since I'm giving you the dot, let's just assume that God is about the size of a human being. Now, cosmically, what is the major difference between the insignificance of a human-sized organism and the insignificance of a dot? It's nothing. They're both almost equally small when looked at through the lens of this endless space.
Don't tell me that mine is religious and yours is science. No. They're both religious, but mine actually makes sense.
How do you figure? You're going to have to explain how it makes sense, because from where I'm sitting, no, it doesn't make any fucking sense whatsoever.
I mean, really, where'd your dot come from?
Maybe it was a mole on your mother's ass. How about that?
Why would a dot create an entire universe of stars, galaxies, life? It's ridiculous. Why didn't it just create a few specks of dust that sat there and did nothing forever? Why did it create this, of all things? Why did it create me, of all things? Get what I'm saying?
Okay, so last time you psychoanalyzed Satan, now you're psychoanalyzing an inanimate dot. Okay, we're still going to go ahead and assume your little dot. That's not what I've ever heard, but we're going to go with that, because why the fuck not? The dot has no consciousness. It doesn't. There is no why when it comes to what the dot does. It's a natural process. I mean, that's like asking, why does water run downhill? I mean, because of gravity. Why is there gravity? It's just, there's an endless fucking question of why, and eventually you're just going to answer it with, God. Because that's the little dunce cap answer for that question. God is always the why. Maybe there's a more complicated series of answers maybe you have to understand a number of facts in order to understand the universe. Maybe there are complex, unified theories and principles in action that we have to understand before we can even begin to grasp what's going on in this reality of ours. Maybe it's not as simple as good.
Imagine there's a merry-go-round, and the football players start spinning it with the kids on it. As it starts going faster and faster, the kids start to lose their grip. Now, as you reach a speed of up to 100 miles an hour, the kids will start flying off the merry-go-round. However, you'll notice that if the merry-go-round is being spun that way, when the kids fly off, they will also be spinning the direction that the merry-go-round was spinning. The conservation of angular momentum says that when an object breaks off of a spinning object, it will be spinning in the same direction as the object it broke off from. Now, if the universe began as a swirling dot that exploded and created everything, then tell me, why are 3 of our planets in our solar system spinning in the opposite direction of Earth? Or tell me why there are many galaxies that are spinning in the opposite direction of other galaxies. Entire galaxies. Billions of stars spinning in the opposite direction. Well, if the Big Bang Theory is true, that's impossible. So, why are they spinning in the opposite direction? I'll tell you why. God created the heavens and the earth, and the reason he did that was to make the Big Bang Theory look stupid.
God created them that way so that a theory that wasn't even around at the time would look stupid. All the planets didn't come from the dot. The dot wasn't just spinning and then the planets flew out. No. The matter spread out throughout the universe. There were interstellar clouds, the clouds collapsed, and those formed the planetary systems. So they weren't going off the momentum of this supposedly spinning dot. They were going off the momentum of these collapsing clouds. That's where the angular motion comes from. It's like if you drop a bunch of billiard balls. They're not all going to be spinning in the same direction. As for the galaxies, most of the galaxies aren't spinning at all, at least not to any noticeable degree. Our galaxy is spinning because there's a huge black hole in the center of it that's sucking all the matter inside. Our entire galaxy is being slowly destroyed from the center. All matter in our galaxy is doomed to be condensed into the black hole at the center of it. That's just so fucking lovely, isn't it? It just brings a tear to your eye. God is so lovely.
We are now finished talking about cosmic evolution, which we've proven to be impossible.
1 down, 4 to go.
Next, let's talk about chemical evolution. In laboratory science, it is proven that hydrogen cannot turn into another element, so we already know that chemical evolution is impossible.
It's impossible because it's impossible. Thank you. Refuted. Ha ha! I win.
Scientists have been desperately trying to find water on other planets. However, this search is futile because there is a small zone around every star called the habitable zone, where liquid water is possible. Our Earth happens to be in a perfectly spherical orbit around our star. However, if the Earth was a mere 5% closer to our Sun, we would cook like Venus. Temperatures would rise in a runaway greenhouse effect to over 900 degrees, making liquid water impossible, also thereby rendering life impossible. Now, if our Earth was a few percent away from our Sun, we would be frozen like Mars, also making life impossible. Now, there is only room for 1 planet in this habitable zone. So that means for every star you see out there, that means only 1 planet can possibly have liquid water. However, not every star makes this possible, and I'll show you why. We orbit what is called the spectral type G2 dwarf main sequence star. It happens to be larger than 90% of the stars in our own galaxy. If our Sun was smaller, like 90% of the stars in our galaxy, the habitable zone would be smaller, so the Earth would have to be closer to the Sun. However, this would increase gravity, so Earth's orbit around the Sun would sink like Mercury, thereby cooking one side of the Earth and freezing the other, making life impossible. We've already discluded 90% of the stars in our galaxy from being possible for life. Can we make this problem any worse? You bet. Our moon exerts a gravitational pull that regulates Earth's climate by stabilizing its tilt, thereby circulating the warm and cold water of its oceans, without which we'd all be dead. Here's a fun fact. Because the moon can eclipse the sun so perfectly, we can measure the constituency of the sun, the materials and elements on its surface, by observing the pinkish arc of the chromosphere at the moment of totality. The moon fits over the sun so perfectly that it makes it possible to observe the surface of the sun. Otherwise, this would be impossible. If the moon was too big or too small, it would be impossible. Because of our vantage point from the Earth, the moon fits perfectly over the sun, the chances of which are 1 in a trillion. There is a large concentration of black holes, exploding stars, and deadly radiation in the center of our galaxy. This is common because there is a large concentration of stars in the center of our galaxy, making life at the galactic core impossible. Our planet is made of magnesium, iron, and oxygen, all higher elements that cannot be found at the outer reaches of our galaxy. So, there has to be a happy medium. Much like the sun, there is a habitable zone where intelligent life is possible. Here, in this very small ring, we can find our Earth, the only place in our galaxy where life can be possible, where the higher elements can be found. Radiation and exploding stars and black holes are not in abundance. We exist in a universe based on rules. All of these rules have restrictions upon what would make life possible. Now, if any one of these are not met to utter perfection, life would not be plausible on Earth. As we learn more about our planet and this universe, we can begin to compile a list of essentials for life and a habitable planet. As we begin to compile this list, we can realize that the chances of these things happening by chance become increasingly small. All these factors have to be met at one place at one time in the galaxy. In an attempt to estimate the probability of attaining this combination of factors simultaneously, some researchers have developed equations assigning a conservative 1 in 10 value to each factor deemed necessary and essential for life. Every element had to be there at the right time in the right amount in the right way. When you multiply the probabilities, you come to a very shocking number. It's a number like that you need to compare to the billions of stars out there. At face value, these probabilities are speaking. The Earth did not happen by chance.
First of all, you make the assumption that life everywhere would have to be exactly like life here on Earth. Wrong. There's no reason to say that this is the only kind of atmosphere that could support life. Just because we don't have it on any of the other planets in this galaxy that we know of, and even that could be wrong, that doesn't mean that it couldn't possibly exist on any of these other kind of planets. Carl Sagan postulated that life could even exist on gas giants like Jupiter. There's nothing to say that a life form can't exist in another kind of climate. We think this is the perfect climate for life because our life evolved in this climate. We're perfectly suited to it. And as for shit like, look how great the moon fits over the sun, it's just perfect. What's that little fucking gold rim around it then, motherfucker? I think that, if it was absolutely perfect in every way, then I would think that it would cover it entirely. I mean, look how pretty it is. Look how perfectly it fits. I mean, if it was slightly closer, slightly farther away, it would cover it more or it would cover it less. There's still some of the sun showing, is what I'm saying. It doesn't fit absolutely perfectly. Even if it did, that wouldn't mean anything. Lots of things look really purposeful because our mind sees purpose in everything. We can prove that the human mind sees purpose in things. That's why when you slam your foot that's why when you stub your toe on a table, you fucking curse the table out. Well, you probably don't. You probably say fiddlesticks or something. But when I hit my foot on a table, I curse that table out because I see purpose there. I act as if the table intended to do me harm. And all you're doing is saying that everything that happens to you or happened to create you must have been intended because you just have this primitive sense of everything having some intention. Gee, everything's just so swell. It must have been put here for me. And as for your little equation there at the end, there's no way to really fucking come up with a decent estimate for that. I mean, the Drake equation is basically the exact same equation. I believe that Frank Drake's own equation placed 10,000 communicative civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy alone. And this is the same math with the same factors, just with different interpretations of the numbers. And numbers are always fucking shaky, but let's say that you're right, and we are the only life form in the entire galaxy. It's such a cop-out to say that consciousness, could only be the result of consciousness. I mean, why then are there different levels of consciousness on this planet? I mean, the earthworm is certainly conscious. It's not as conscious as we are. And we could potentially be more conscious. It's conceivable. I mean, not even the consciousness of every human being is the same. I mean, your consciousness, for instance, is extremely low, whereas the consciousness of most people is pretty decent, and the consciousness of some people, some exceptional people like Stephen Hawking, Richard Dawkins, or Carl Sagan, exceptionally high. We still pretty much have all these levels of consciousness present. So how can you say that consciousness is either something that you have or you don't have when you can clearly see, just by looking around on this planet, that there are different levels of consciousness for different organisms and different levels of consciousness among human beings? So to say that that's something that must have been magically created instantly and at a certain level by a certain powerful being is ridiculous.
Abiogenesis is the idea that life can form from non-living material, which is also called spontaneous generation, which was proven wrong over 200 years ago.
Okay, VenomFangx. Evolution is the process whereby organisms become more complex over time. Abiogenesis is a secular explanation as to the origins of life on Earth. And it is not the same thing as spontaneous generation. Spontaneous generation was the idea that people got when they looked at like rotting food and saw that maggots were coming out. They said those maggots must have just formed on this food. Later people realized it was fucking flies laying their eggs. Spontaneous generation is when a complex organism comes out of non-living matter. Abiogenesis doesn't require the organism to be complex. In fact, the first organisms to exist were far more primitive even than our single-celled organisms today.
The smallest living cell on Earth has a DNA string of some 1 million pairs of DNA, and it has 600 genes. If we cut this number and just took a quarter of that, we would have a string of some 250,000 base pairs of DNA. That is still a hefty number. The chances of such an arrangement of DNA arising by sheer chance are 4 to the 250,000th power, and that's generous. The number of atoms in the entire universe is said to be about 4 to the 250th power. I would therefore call 4 to the 250,000th power an almost infinitely impossible chance. Note that the supposition advanced that perhaps it was RNA that produced the first life has the exact same problem. The problem, though, is even worse than that. Not only do you need 2 strings of DNA perfectly matched to have life, but you also need a cell so that the DNA code can get the material to sustain that life. It is therefore a chicken and egg problem. You cannot have life without DNA, or RNA if you want to be generous, but one also has to have the cell itself to provide the nutrients for the sustenance of the first life.
Congratulations. You have thoroughly discredited the theory of spontaneous generation. Unfortunately, you haven't touched the theory of abiogenesis, because, once again, not the same fucking thing. You see this? I'm going to do like you always do. I'm not going to bother to screen cap it. I'm just going to film the fucking screen. Creationist idea about abiogenesis. Simple chemicals, bacteria. Real theory of abiogenesis simplified. Simple chemicals, polymers, replicating polymers, hypercycle, protobiont, I don't even know what the fuck that is, bacteria. Congratulations on discrediting a theory that no one has held for like 200 years. You're amazing.
What Miller did was this. He tried to create the 20 essential left-handed amino acids that are required to create life. However, what he ended up doing was creating about 10. You'd think that's impressive, but they weren't all left-handed. They were amino acids, but right-handed amino acids are actually lethal to life.
The first self-replicators probably didn't have 20 amino acids. They probably had closer to 8 and possibly less. It's not a matter of chance, you understand? It's a matter of certain chemicals have certain properties. Let's simplify this down to a level that you can understand. Now,
chemicals relate to one another in different ways based upon their physical biochemical properties, right? Right? It's like if you pour some oil in a cup and then you pour some water on top of the oil will still rise to the surface. You see, that's because the oil has a different property than the water, and that's just the way they react to one another. You don't look at the oil rising to the top and say, well, this is obviously the will of God. Do you? Please tell me you don't. Also, and this is really fucking important, and I didn't even know this until I did a little bit of research for this video, is that there are actually bacteria out there that use right-handed amino acids. So that, I mean, I guess I could have just said that alone and it would have pretty much fucking slammed the brakes on your argument.
The complexity of living systems could never evolve by chance. They had to be designed and created. A system that is irreducibly complex has precise components working together to perform the basic functions of the system. A mousetrap is a simple example. If any part of that system were missing, the system would cease to function and die, in case of living animals. Gradual additions could not account for the origin of such a system. It would have to come together fully formed and integrated. Many living systems exhibit this: vision, blood clotting, etc. When you look at a watch, you assume there was a watchmaker. A watch is too complex to happen by chance, yet such living systems are almost infinitely more complex than a watch. They could not be random, they simply had to be designed and created.
Okay, so you're basically combining the irreducible complexity argument with the watchmaker argument. Let's address the irreducible complexity one first. Once again, we're going to do this in the simplest, dumbest, fucking most dumbed down terms possible because, well, I'm not too bright, you're not too bright, the people at home probably aren't too bright. So we're going to draw a little happy stick figure here. We're going to make it a female stick figure. Yay! And this female stick figure has some big ass titties. Are you with me so far? I know you're probably uncomfortable with the idea of titties, but yeah, I'm going to go there. Okay, so let's say that you make the claim that her titties are irreducibly complex. I see. Because let's say her titties are made of A, B, D. You understand what I'm saying? A, B, D. There's no way that B could have gone to D because that's just too fucking complicated. But what if there was once C here? What if it evolved A, B, C, D, and then C evolved out because it just wasn't needed? Do you understand what I'm saying here? Basically, maybe you'll understand when I give you the summation here. Evolution can produce... Oops, sorry, wrong way. Evolution can produce irreducible complexity. All it has to do is produce something with some redundancies, and then when the redundancies evolve away, voila, you have irreducible complexity. As for the watchmaker thing, God is, of course, super complex. He has to be. There's no way that God isn't complex. He's omnipotent, omniscient. He created the entire universe, apparently can monitor every atom at every moment. He has to be complex beyond reckoning. So if the watchmaker argument is valid, then it does more to discredit him than it does to discredit anything else. It really becomes the watchmaker paradox. And it's not an argument for creation, it's more just like a fucking noodle scratcher. I mean, when faced with the watchmaker argument, pretty much all people have to do is you know, you have two choices. Either we started off with something that wasn't so complex, but gradually over time it grew to be more complex. Or we could start off with the idea that, bam, there was the most complex thing in all of existence from the very beginning. And something, in fact, something more complex than the things that he is invoked to explain.
it really just doesn't make any fucking sense. Let's say, for instance, we didn't know where watches came from. And so we postulated that watches must have been created by a giant machine about 1 billion times more complicated than a watch. You see how that doesn't really provide much of an explanation, right? Surely you see that. Surely. And don't say, "Don't call me Shirley." That would just be too damn cute and I'd have to kiss you.
Evolution flies directly in the face of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. Your car is not going to get more complex over time, it's going to fall apart. This law in physics states that all systems, whether open or closed, have a tendency towards disorder. Adding energy does not help.
Okay, so here is what the second law of thermodynamics actually states. No process is possible in which the sole result is the transfer of energy from a cooler to a hotter body. And you might be asking yourself, what the fuck does this have to do with evolution? And you'd be right to ask yourself that, because it doesn't have jack shit to do with evolution. By the way, when VenomFangx says that entropy applies to both closed and open systems, he is, once again, just outright fucking lying to you. It only applies to closed systems, and life isn't a closed system. VenomFangx is a stupid creationist.
If I flip a coin, I have a 50-50 chance of getting heads. To get heads 5 times in a row is unlikely, but possible. If I flipped the coin long enough, I would eventually get 5 in a row. If I flipped it for years non-stop, I might even get 50 or 100 in a row. But this is only because getting heads is inherently possible. However...
You want heads, baby? I'll give you heads. Oh, man. I'm sorry. That was... yeah. Well, I just looked at the rest of your video, and it seems like for the rest of it, you just kind of retread the same stuff you covered in one of the earlier videos. I don't know why you decided to go after speciation once again. But it's already been refuted, so I guess that's the end of part 3. See you next week for part 4, you fucking cute, despicable, fucking evil bastard, you. Mwah! Little did Calvin know he had been brainwashed by the liberal atheist media into believing a lie that would eventually damn his soul to hell.
Here's a sad fact about dinosaurs. They are used more than any other creature to push the evolutionary theory, when in fact they are proof of creationism. The biblical view of history, that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, is the only way to make sense of all the discoveries we are now making, such as the unfossilized dinosaur bones with malleable soft tissue and red blood cells in them.
Okay, so first of all, the bones were in fact fossilized. In fact, when the scientists made the discovery that there was soft tissue present there, they had to painstakingly remove the fossilized elements from that tissue, because there was a bunch of little pockets of minerals in there. It wasn't like they found it and it was like, wow, it's the same consistency, it's like it died yesterday. This changes everything. What they found was something that was just as hard as the bone around it. Probably only they could have identified it as being soft tissue. They had to rehydrate it in order to get that pliability that you talk about, that malleability that you're sitting there bragging about, was something they had to bring about through rehydration of this tissue. And the tissue, they don't even know that this is actually T-Rex tissue. They're still wondering what this is. They just might have T-Rex tissue, might have the, not red blood cells, but something that is derived from them. Almost a sort of biological fossilization. And there's no DNA. And it's really actually very telling that there's no DNA. It's not that DNA couldn't conceivably survive 65 million years. It's just really fucking unlikely. I mean, it could happen. Let's not rule anything out. But according to you, they were wiped out about 5,000 years ago when the world was flooded by God. And presumably they died alongside a lot of the other species of animals that are extinct now. Now, the woolly mammoth comes to mind. The saber-toothed tiger. Those kind of animals come to mind. So you would think that if we can't find any evidence, we can't find any dinosaur DNA, then we shouldn't be able to find any mammoth DNA. But that's just not the case. In fact, we're already working on mapping the mammoth genome. Chances are we're not going to be able to build Jurassic Park because we just don't have any dino DNA. And if they died as recently as 5,000 years ago, we really fucking should.
We are recovering a huge amount of artifacts that show dinosaurs lived with man. In 1966, in a cave near Ica, Peru, a man named Dr. Javier Cabrera found 20,000 stones which we now call the Ica stones. These seem to depict giant reptiles, or dinosaurs. Now, what's interesting to note is these circular patterns on the skin of the dinosaurs. Recently we found fossilized dinosaur skin which showed circular patterns on its skin. You have to wonder now, did the people who made those rocks see a living dinosaur?
These stones were not discovered by Dr. Cabrera. They weren't even, he didn't even claim that he discovered them. He claimed that they were discovered by a farmer that he found 20,000 of in a cave. I'm not even going to ask how the fuck he lugged them all back to his farmhouse, but let's just look at the facts here and see if this sounds reasonable to you. The location of this cave where these stones was found has never been revealed. Now, if you discovered all of these priceless artifacts, don't you think you might want to reveal their location? I don't know. Why would they want to keep scientists from this cave? Why would they want to keep archaeologists from this cave where they found all these ancient rocks with all these carvings? Now, what was this farmer doing with these stones? He was selling them to tourists. I mean, it's a good thing that the ancients made 20,000 of them, so he has a pretty much inexhaustible supply to sell to the tourists. Now, the farmer admitted to the police that he forged the stones, but well, let's not even admit that into evidence because he was under threat of jail time. But the fact of the matter is that these stones have been examined, and you know they show signs of modern paints. They show signs of being polished with sandpaper, which is a relatively recent innovation. And they don't show nearly the level of wear and tear that you would expect an artifact to have.
TalkOrigins.org. Their response to the Ica stones. The stones cannot be dated without knowing their source, and their source has never been revealed. Are they saying they can't test a rock unless they know its source? Now, if they would have said, okay, we can date the rock, but that doesn't prove when someone carved an image onto it, that I could understand, but that's not what they said. They said they can't date the rock because they don't know its source. And then right above they say they know it was carved in modern society.
Okay, well the reason the stones can't be dated is because the kind of rock they're made of doesn't contain any sort of radioactive isotopes. If they knew where the stones came from, they might be able to excavate the site, do a little digging around, and possibly figure out when the stones were made, or at least when the rocks that the stones are carved on came from. But it's really kind of weird also that the stones were only in one place, one fucking cave, in the, you know, nothing else like it in the entire rest of the country. But in this one cave, these stones were just stacked up in abundance. I mean, this story just isn't credible. Now, that's not to say that there's not ancient artwork that doesn't depict things that look an awful lot like fucking dinosaurs. But the thing you have to remember is that it's not inconceivable that these people couldn't have come across dinosaur skeletons themselves. And it's also not inconceivable that it could just be a fucking coincidence. I mean, even today in our movies, we create tons of fucking monsters. I mean, we're a monster-creating people. Humanity loves its fucking monsters. You know, we got the Balrog from Lord of the Rings, and Gollum, and orcs, and elves, and fairies, and nymphs, and fucking goblins, and trolls, and, you know, just watch the movie Alien. I mean, if we can make that shit up, I mean, there's pretty much no limit to what our minds can conceive of.
The dating methods that evolutionists rely upon to assign millions and billions of years to rocks are very inconsistent and based on unproven and questionable assumptions. Dating methods that use radioactive decay to determine age assume that the radioactive decay rates have always been constant. Yet, research has shown that decay rates can change according to the chemical environment the material being tested is in. In fact, decay rates have been increased in the laboratory by a factor of 1 billion. All such dating methods also assume a closed system, that no isotopes were gained or lost by the rock since its formation. It's common knowledge that hydrothermal waters at temperatures of only a few hundred degrees centigrade can create an open system where chemicals can move easily from one rock system to another. In fact, this process is one of the excuses used by evolutionists to reject dates that don't fit with their expectations. What's not commonly known is that the majority of dates are not even consistent for the same rock. Furthermore, 20th century lava flows often register dates in the millions and billions of years.
In order to believe that there is something hugely wrong with radiometric dating, you're going to have to believe that every geologist in the world is either so unscrupulous that they don't give a shit if they're getting totally wrong results, or that they're all malevolent and part of some huge global conspiracy to suppress the truth. Both of those ideas are, of course, insane and stupid. You know, if there were the wild and crazy fluctuations in radiometric dating that you think there are, then there would be no consensus with the dates. I mean, things would be dated like, I don't know, this could be 100 billion years old, or it could be 5 minutes old, we don't know. They wouldn't even bother with it. The fact of the matter is that usually the dates, they use independent methods. There's multiple types of radiometric dating, and usually they're going to use more than one method to figure out the date of something. And if radiometric dating is so fucking off, it's so crazy, they should come out with completely different results. And usually the results are within 1 or 2% of one another. I mean, you're never gonna find a dating method where it's like, oh, well, this is, 2 million years, 6 months, 3 days, and 45 minutes old. That's never gonna happen. They're going to be like, well, this is 150 to 175 million years old. And in the grand scheme of things, that's pretty fucking good. Close enough. Now, the thing about lava being frequently misdated is a complete lie. It's a common creationist lie. Anyone who listens to creationist arguments long enough is going to hear it endlessly. Now, what you're referring to is a single instance where 200-year-old lava was dated as 22 million years old. Thing is, they weren't dating the lava. They were dating xenoliths within the lava. A xenolith is a foreign rock. What they were doing, and this wasn't even, they weren't even dating it for the sake of dating it. This wasn't like a mistake where they accidentally dated the xenolith instead of the lava. They weren't dating the lava. They wanted to date the xenolith to see if this particular method, the potassium-argon method, would work on xenoliths. And it turned out that it didn't. So they don't use it for that. So basically, the entire claim that this lava was misdated was based upon
some scientists dating not the lava, but foreign rocks in the lava that rightly came up as millions of years old because they were millions of years old, and then ultimately dismissing those findings themselves, not because they expected to find something other than what they found, but because their suspicions that this particular dating method wouldn't work on this particular material were confirmed. You know, I'm so sick of it. Pisses me off whenever I go to the evolutionist sites that refute you guys on these points. They always act like you guys just didn't understand what the data was. Oh, well, they just misinterpreted the data, and it led to this big misunderstanding. I'm not going to say that to you. I know you guys are flat out lying. You see the truth, you twist it in order to support what you want to believe, as always. You're liars. You're not stupid, you're liars. Well, maybe you are stupid, but mostly you're liars.
There are even more fatal variables that make this theory even more ridiculous, carbon-14 dating. The next problem is you take the amount of carbon-14 in the dead animal, then check its half-life to claim to know how old it is. However, the assumption is made that you automatically know when the animal died.
Okay, carbon-14 dating is only good up to about 50,000 years and would not be used to date dinosaur fossils under any circumstances. Not that they even could, because there's no organic matter left in dinosaur fossils, they're just fossils. So, obviously, once again, you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
We are now looking at what is called the geological column, where we can see the various strata layers, so they call them. Now, what is this geological column, and where can we find it? What they claim is every one of these layers is a different time zone, and that, for some reason, mud actually seems to pile up over time, even though the opposite is proven. Erosion goes downhill, not uphill. But whatever, we'll say that magical mud piles upwards. That's fine, whatever they want to say. Anyways, the reason that the carbon-14 dating people require that we tell them what was found in which strata layer is so that they can tell us how old the animal is according to which strata layer it was found. Now, how did they date the strata layers? You guessed it. By the age of the animals they found. You see, the animals date the rocks, and the rocks date the animals. Now here's a fact. The only way to get a fossil is to bury the animal quickly. If you take a dead chicken from, say, Swiss Chalet and put it in your backyard, just chain it down, it's not going to last very long. The other animals are going to pick at it, it's going to decompose, weather is going to tear it apart, it's not going to fossilize. You need to bury it. A worldwide flood would bury that thing like that, and it would fossilize. A worldwide flood would bury the dinosaurs.
Stratification is a concept so simple that even you probably struggle to pretend not to understand it. Alright, it's pretty fucking straightforward. Here is an initial clunk of fucking land right here. Now, let's say that the floods come, and they bring with them some fucking mud. Now there's a layer of mud. Then some sands blow in from the east. Now we got sand. Then, I don't know, some people come along and they start planting fucking grass and shit. And they colonize the desert. Make this fucking layer of organic shit here. And they build little houses and huts and shit, whatever they got at this point in their technology. And of course, all of these collapse over time. So you got this whole layer of organic matter and stone and shit imported by man. And over time, sand blows on that, mud blows on that. Mud comes via the floods and shit. It keeps building up. This is not something arguable. This is proven. I mean, you look at the Earth, it has these layers. You dig up any ground in this country, pretty much, you're going to find layers of different rocks and stuff. Now, in any one flood, such as the Great Flood that you posit, the heavier materials are going to go on the bottom. That's like the big rocks and shit. and the lighter materials are going to be on top. But if you look at the layers of the Earth, you see a lot of instances where it's completely different. Now, you can say that God created it that way, but then you'd have to answer for why fossils are buried way deep down the fuck in it. It wouldn't make sense. If God created the Earth in these layers, there wouldn't be shit buried way the fuck down near the bottom. Not the bottom, of course, because that would be the core of the Earth. Now, here's the real kicker. You say that all this land was moved in one single flood, which we've already pretty much shown couldn't happen because the layers just don't attest to that. But also, if that happened, you would see all these fossils, like the dinosaurs. That's a dinosaur. And you would see people. And you would see woolly mammoths. We'll make this a mammoth. This is totally indecipherable. You would see all that shit right at the same level. But you don't see that. You know what you do see? You see primitive, one-cell organisms down near the bottom, and you see slightly more sophisticated organisms as you get higher and higher. They don't find, never once have they ever found, a mammoth fossil below a dinosaur fossil. It has not happened. Typically, and when I say typically, I don't just mean, pretty often. I mean 100% of the time so far. That has not happened even once. If this all happened in one giant flood, there's no way that would be the case.
Now, an evolutionist is going to claim that the Grand Canyon is a wonderful place to look at strata layers. However, they're also going to say that it was erosion over millions of years that caused the canyon. So which is it?
Are you really having that much difficulty with the concept? Alright, we're keeping our basic layered thing here. We're just adding into it the prospect of a fucking river. And over time, the river carves its way through this. Digging a little fucking canyon. All this shit is still the same. It's still piling up here on the sides. And the reason a canyon is such a great place to look at the fucking layers is because you can observe them right from the fucking side. Right from inside the canyon. One process is forming the canyon, and a wholly other process that has nothing to do with it is forming these layers. The process of stratification. It's not difficult to understand. A fucking 2-year-old could understand it. The only people who don't understand it are people who are willfully ignorant, like you.
Alright, I'm going to show you a dinosaur in the Bible. Job chapter 40. It talks about an animal called Behemoth, which is the biggest creature God has ever made. It says it eats grass like an ox, and moves his tail like a cedar tree. It says his bones are like beams of bronze, and his ribs are like bars of iron. It says that his strength is in his belly. The Bible also talks about an animal called the Leviathan and the unicorn. The unicorn was not a pink flying horse that sails over rainbows. It was a ferocious, untamable beast in the Bible that can pierce you with its horn, probably like a triceratops.
I don't know what was meant by unicorn. You don't know what was meant by unicorn. To just throw in dinosaur and be so certain about it, based on nothing but your own bullshit. I mean, that's something you pulled right the fuck out of your ass. It was a triceratops, obviously. I mean, triceratops have fucking 3 horns, but whatever. That's why they call them a triceratops. Behemoth description, yeah, that sounds kind of like a dinosaur. But, did they just have one name for all the dinosaurs? Regardless of the fact that there were all these different species of dinosaurs, and most of them don't even look all that much alike. They only had one name, Behemoth. I mean, some of the dinosaurs were tiny. Where's the mention of them? They mention oxen all the time. They mention their livestock. They mention goats. They mention sheep. They mention all kinds of animals in the Bible.
Yet they don't ever talk about, they don't reminisce about anything resembling a velociraptor. And I know you continue this dinosaur and great flood shit in the next one, but I plan on showing you proof. And when I say proof, I actually mean proof, not like when you say proof and you just mean, you know, the product of your... I mean actual proof that the flood didn't fucking happen. Anyway, join me next time. Amazing Atheist, peace the fuck out, bitches.